This week on They Think It's All Over, we've got a comedy feast. There's jelly deals, Yorkshire pudding, fruit fancies, gentleman's relish, seedless jaffas, and ginger nuts. That's They Think It's All Over after the news on BBC One.
This is BBC One in the South. Now the 10 o'clock news with Hugh Edwards and Roger Finn.
Gordon Brown admits he was too optimistic about this year's economic growth. The Chancellor and his team revised their sums and announced that they'll have to borrow more than they'd planned. On the high street and across industry, it's been a difficult year, according to Mr. Brown.
As Chancellor, I have always understood that the strength of a monetary and fiscal regime is how it performs not just in good years, but in this, the toughest and most challenging year for the economy.
Mr. Brown faced immediate claims that his reputation was crumbling. Also tonight, Saddam on trial. The first witnesses have given evidence in court. Condoleezza Rice denies that America allows terror suspects to be tortured. And a shed turned boat, turned shed again, wins this year's Turner Prize.
In the South, the pledge to wed. Brighton leads the way as a new law sees same-sex couples commit to a civil ceremony. And police search for these children in connection with a fire on a bus.
Good evening. Gordon Brown has accepted that the economy is growing more slowly than he'd expected. The Chancellor, delivering his pre-budget report to the Commons, said this was proving to be a difficult and challenging year. He faced immediate claims from the Conservatives that his reputation was now crumbling. The main admission in Mr. Brown's report was on the rate of economic growth. This year, the economy is expected to grow by 1.75%, rather than the prediction of at least 3%. There'll have to be more government borrowing, an extra £5 billion, and there'll be higher tax on North Sea oil, raising an extra £2 billion. This will help to fund the winter fuel payment for the elderly until the next election. First tonight, our political editor Nick Robinson on the day's events at Westminster.
Gordon Brown strides out of the Treasury once again. How he must have wished that today he didn't have to. The awkward questions simply couldn't be avoided.
Have you got your figures right now, sir?
Keep smiling is clearly lesson 1 in the Chancellor's guide on how best to pass on bad news.
Order. Statement, the Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Lesson 2 is have your excuses ready.
The last year has seen a virtual doubling of global oil and commodity prices.
Lesson 3, ignore the jeers about a story of failure. Tell instead a tale of triumph in the face of adversity.
As Chancellor, I have always understood that the strength of a monetary and fiscal regime is how it performs not just in good years, but in this, the toughest and most challenging year for the economy.
Inflation, he said, despite that, was low. Interest rates and unemployment too. But what about growth?
Not the economy in recession, but growth even in this toughest year at 1.75%. And this is...
Did you miss that? They almost did. But then they'd realised that the Chancellor had just halved his growth forecast.
And this, Mr. Speaker...
Mr. Brown's banking on the fact that those watching beyond the Westminster Village don't care much about missed forecasts. They care about life in the real world. And there he promised no increase in the cost of fuel, unless that is you actually drill for the stuff. Oil companies are to be hit by a £2 billion windfall tax. What will that pay for? £1 billion in savings to reassure the boys in the city, who barely looked up from their trading screens, and winter fuel payments for pensioners from now till the next election, to reassure the Labour Party.
Stability is the foundation. More investment, not less. Responsibility from all. Opportunity for all, and not just a few. And I commend this pre-budget statement.
It had been a test for the Chancellor, but it was a test for his Tory opposite number 2. George Osborne is one half of Team Cameron, who expect to be leading the Tories from tomorrow.
Now this is a tragic story of a Chancellor who has been forced to wait so long to go to number 10 that his reputation in charge of number 11 is crumbling.
The public, he said, had not been told the truth at the election.
This is a Chancellor forced into the humiliation of admitting he got it all wrong. This is a Chancellor who is past his sell-by date. This is a Chancellor who is holding Britain back.
The Lib Dems, too, insisted that Mr Brown had only himself to blame for his problems.
But why can he also not say, I have made mistakes, we've exaggerated the projections, there have been administrative over-centralisation? Why can he simply not stand up and acknowledge his own failures?
There's only one big economic story from this budget, and that is a £2 billion tax grab at Scotland's resources in the North Sea, which will cost thousands of jobs in Scotland.
You could tell it was going to be a difficult day. Tony Blair and Gordon Brown appeared together for the first time since the election. An appearance designed to promote plans to help the young move house on a day Gordon Brown hopes won't stall his move to number 10. Nick Robinson, BBC News, Westminster.
So what does the Chancellor's report tell us about the state of the economy, and what will the effect be on public services? Here's our economics editor, Evan Davis.
We're used to hearing about more money for hospitals from Gordon Brown, investment in public services. Not today. He couldn't afford many goodies, but it won't hurt a bit, he told us. Today's was Gordon Brown's toughest statement as Chancellor by far. Everything worse than he told us when he last opened his budget box just before the election. Growth, most obviously, just 1.75% this year. But Mr Brown has two messages. It's not that bad, which it isn't, and it'll get better anyway, growth up next year. The same story on borrowing. On his preferred definition, there was bad news. Last year, he borrowed £20 billion, £4 billion more than he told us in the budget, even though the budget was at the end of the year. And this year, he's borrowing more than he wanted. But again, it's not that bad, he said, and it'll get better in the next few years, disappearing altogether. With these figures, Mr Brown says he'll meet his golden rule, only to borrow for investment. But it's now clear that without juggling the timing of how he measures it, he would have failed the rule. So on borrowing, Mr Brown has been consistently over-optimistic for the last 5 years.
Well, it was already clear from what we've seen so far this year that he was having to borrow more than he'd expected. And if you look further into the future, the Chancellor's clearly suffering from the fact that he's getting less tax revenues than he'd expected.
Who'll help fill the hole in the public finances? The oil companies. Mr Brown got some money from them in the budget earlier this year, and now he's asking for more.
Well, frankly, I'm shocked. This is a very black day for the UK oil and gas industry, and I'm amazed that a Chancellor who talks about the need for stability and investing in the long term can take such a capricious attitude with regard to the taxation of UK oil and gas.
Well, if the party's over for the oil companies, it's also set to end for public spending. Not right now, but in the near future. Look at the growth rates of spending from this year to next year and beyond. Now, spending rises, but by less than we're used to. Is the Chancellor becoming a Tory, restraining growth? Well, those later years, they're not fixed in stone, but Mr Brown is now assuming that public spending will grow more slowly than the economy. Schools and other public services may feel that. So, in this Christmas season, the Chancellor wasn't bearing big gifts. A change from Gordon Brown, the big spender, to Gordon Brown, a slightly more cautious spender. Evan Davis, BBC News.
So let's go to Downing Street and talk to our political editor, Nick Robinson. Nick, how does Gordon Brown emerge from today's events in your view?
Well, a little bruised, Hugh, but not, I sense, mightily perturbed. Why? Because he senses the only people really feeling the pain tonight after this post-election budget statement, when often there is bad news. The only people feeling it are really people with an interest in oil companies. And he figures if this is as bad as it gets, then it's really not a political problem at all. That's the key, of course. Is it as bad as it gets? Because in the end, the argument won't be about forecasts and disappointed or embarrassed chancellors. It will, as someone once said, all be about the economy, stupid.
And all of this, Nick, happening on the eve of the Tory leadership result, which is coming tomorrow afternoon. Is there a sense there that the political balance is changing in some way?
Absolutely. Just as we expect Mr Brown to move from number 11 to number 10, accidents barring. Also, everyone expects David Cameron now to be elected the Tory leader tomorrow. We're not just seeing a new political era, though, in the sense of two big new dominant personalities in politics, but as Evan Davis was saying, a new political terrain, arguing not simply about how to hand out largesse, whether in tax cuts or more money for the public services, but how to cope when the public finances are tight, and argue about what to do to make them less tight. Gordon Brown counts on the public sticking with him in bad times. The Tories' huge task is to say there are bad times because he's still in office.
Nick, in Downing Street, thank you very much. At the trial of the former Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein, the court has heard evidence from the first witnesses to attend the hearing in person. They're given details of the killing of 148 people in a village north of Baghdad back in 1982. The trial has again been interrupted by angry exchanges, and at one point the defence team walked out after the judge rejected their arguments about the legitimacy of the court. The trial is being held in the secure Green Zone in central Baghdad, from where our World Affairs editor, John Simpson, sent us this report.
It was the day Saddam Hussein really began to cut loose. His half-brother Barzan did too, yelling bewilderingly, "Down with dictatorship and long live democracy." And all the time, the senior judge stayed calmly above it all, as though this were just another case to try. The judge needed all his calmness and diplomacy to avert a crisis with the defense lawyers, anxious about their safety after the murder of two of their number, and determined to challenge the legitimacy of the court. They staged a walkout. After the judge had coaxed them back, we heard the first serious witness, a man from the town of Dujail. His testimony was emotional stuff. As a teenager, Ahmed Dujaili had been arrested and tortured. Standing a few feet away from the man who presided over it all, Ahmed Dujaili spoke of children tortured in front of their parents, pregnant women brutally beaten, daily executions. All these things really happened, of course, but both Saddam and Barzan spotted weak points in his evidence and homed in on them better than any lawyer. Saddam, as ever referring to himself in the third person, managed to plant the impression that Dujaili had been carefully primed as a witness. Showing how he has to jot down his notes, he asks, how come Saddam Hussein isn't allowed pen and paper, but the witness can bring entire files into court? Still, Saddam has no illusions how this trial will end. "I'm not afraid to be executed," he says. And he goes on, "If you want my neck, you can have it."
It's really frustrating how much the official television coverage cuts out of what goes on in the courtroom. So you don't see pictures of Barzan, for instance, Saddam's half-brother, spitting at his enemies in the gallery, nor whacking one of the guards on the arm with his notebook. You don't hear Saddam Hussein himself rambling on about Napoleon and Mussolini, and you certainly don't hear him say that it's essential for Iraqis to fight the occupation till the end. John Simpson, BBC News, Baghdad.
Foreign Secretary Jack Straw says the government stands ready to hear from the Iraqi group holding 4 hostages, including the British peace activist Norman Kember. Mr. Kember, who's 74, was seized in Baghdad over a week ago, along with the other peace campaigners. There have been reports that Western diplomats have already made contact with the kidnappers. Condoleezza Rice, the US Secretary of State, has denied that America is allowing suspected terrorists to be tortured. Dr. Rice, who started a European tour today, admitted that suspects had been flown around the world for questioning, but she said that America used lawful weapons in the fight against terrorism. Matt Fry reports.
For a year now, Condi Rice has gone out of her way to heal rifts amongst allies. Today she flew to Berlin knowing that she had to start all over again. So it was very early this morning, before getting on a plane, that she had to issue the kind of denial that would once have been thought unnecessary.
The United States government does not authorize or condone torture of detainees. Torture and conspiracy to commit torture are crimes under U.S. law wherever they may occur in the world.
At issue, hundreds of American flights using European airspace and air bases, especially in Germany. Their cargo, terrorist suspects secretly transported by the CIA to countries where they could be tortured. The practice is called rendition, a shady euphemism from a war fought largely in the shadows. For instance, Khaled Masri, a German citizen of Arab descent, claims he was rendered to a secret US base in Afghanistan for 5 months before being released as innocent. What further upset the human rights lobby are reports that the CIA has set up secret detention camps, also called black sites, in Eastern Europe.
Democracies don't send people into secret dungeons where no one, no lawyer, no Red Cross humanitarian worker, no court, no judicial system has access to them. This is the work of dictatorships, and it's something that America has long condemned.
But the architects of rendition say it's an established tool that has become indispensable in a new kind of war.
War is not a moral activity. The desire to protect Americans is, I think, the one that motivates most people at the CIA, and I think the agency has done a very good job in this regard.
First Guantanamo Bay and Abu Ghraib, now renditions and black sites. There's no doubt that the way the US is fighting the war on terror has created a huge image problem. The administration says that many of these measures are indispensable. The critics say that they're reprehensible and counterproductive. Matt Fry, BBC News, Washington.
And still to come on tonight's programme, the news from this year's Turner Prize.
Yes, indeed, we'll be hearing from this year's winner of the Turner Prize. His artwork, a rather old, decrepit-looking shed.
Britain's attempt to break the deadlock over the European Union budget has been given a frosty reception in Brussels. Jack Straw, the Foreign Secretary, said Britain would offer to pay more than £5 billion extra, but he also proposed cuts of up to 10% in funds to new member states. The President of the European Commission said the plan was unrealistic, as Mark Mardell reports.
All over Eastern Europe, European Union money is being spent updating motorways and the like. The British plan, outlined by Jack Straw, is to give these poor countries less money. The Commission President shot down the idea almost before the words had left the Foreign Secretary's mouth.
This increased funding has to be paid for. We in the United Kingdom government are prepared to pay our fair share, but no more than a fair share.
The proposal of the British presidency is unacceptable. It is simply not realistic. It is not realistic considering the enlarged Europe we have now and the stronger Europe we want to have.
In June, Tony Blair was blamed for causing a crisis by rejecting a budget deal that was on the table because it cost Britain too much. Now Britain has come up with a counter-proposal. Britain's offer is a smaller budget, £15 billion less than the one proposed in June. It gives £10 billion less to the new member states. And it costs Britain £800 million a year more, either by cutting the rebate or putting more in. It's not finding favour.
One couldn't imagine that the compromise could be at the cost of poor nations, and this is really robbing of some hope, and not only money, but also of some hope, these poor newcomers in the European Union.
The words of the Commission President are very strong, but then he doesn't have a vote or a veto. The Poles do, and the French do, and they too say that the proposal is unacceptable. But British officials are not downhearted. They say, Riley, they expect to absorb a lot of hostility in the days to come. Mark Mardell, BBC News, Brussels.
At least 5 people have been killed by a suicide bomber in the Israeli town of Netanya. The bomb exploded outside a shopping centre. The militant group Islamic Jihad said it was retaliating for the recent deaths of some of its senior members in raids by Israeli security forces. From Netanya, our Middle East correspondent James Reynolds reports.
Watch the arrow. It points to Lotfi Abu Sada, carrying a bag of explosives, calmly on his way to commit mass murder. Here's the view from a security camera in a nearby car park. Keep an eye on the top left of the screen. The suicide bombing is caught on film. This is the bomber's work. He detonated his explosives outside a shopping centre. He killed himself and 5 Israelis.
Netanya is only a few miles away from the edge of the Palestinian West Bank. It's just down the end of the road there. And Israel has put up its separation barrier to try to stop suicide bombers from getting in. Normally it works, but clearly today it didn't, because the bomber was able to get out of the West Bank and into Netanya, where he walked along towards the shopping centre, where he was stopped by a security guard and where he blew himself up.
This is the bomber's farewell video. Lotfi Abu Sada was sent by Islamic Jihad, a small group which wants to destroy Israel. They'll hope their attack weakens the Jewish state, but Israel has been through worse. One more bombing may not change all that much. James Reynolds, BBC News, Netanya.
The inquest into the deaths of 91 British people who died in the Asian tsunami has opened in London. The hearing, which will last 4 days, will only examine when, where and how each of the victims died. But relatives say they must be given an opportunity to criticise the response of the authorities, both in Asia and here at home, as Nicholas Witchell reports.
For those who were caught up in it, they were moments of almost unimaginable horror, as families who'd gone to enjoy Christmas in the sun were separated and swept away. For those who were bereaved by it, there's been almost a year now of dealing with its aftermath. Today, the anguish of the Asian tsunami was relived in the soulless surroundings of the Olympia Conference Centre in West London, temporarily redesignated as a coroner's court. Families and friends were told by the coroner, Alison Thompson, that the purpose of the inquest was to confirm identities and causes of death. She went on, "I'm very aware families may have concerns about other issues, the speed of the local response or the level of involvement by consular staff. I'm sorry," she said, "these matters cannot be examined in this court." A geophysicist explained what had caused the tsunami, but why, asked relative after relative, had it not been possible to give any warning that the waves were coming? Thousands of lives might have been saved. Others wanted to know why it had taken so long to identify their loved ones. And then it was time to deal with individual cases of the 93 people whose remains were brought back to Britain. Each one was dealt with in a few minutes. Evidence was given of where they were and how they died. One of them was Charlotte Jones. She was 23 and had arrived in Thailand on a trip around the world. Her father was listening in court.
We had to hear what people had to say. I'm not sure that all our questions were answered. I think it's pretty clear that some of the questions will never be answered.
It will take until Thursday for all the inquests to be completed. As each one ends, the coroner records the name of the deceased and gives as the cause of death, drowning, a victim of the tsunami. Nicholas Witchell, BBC News, at the tsunami inquests.
Hundreds of gay and lesbian couples have visited register offices today to apply for the new civil partnership. Some offices are already fully booked for the first day the ceremonies can take place on December the 21st. Those who unite in a civil partnership will have the same property and inheritance rights as married couples, as well as the same pension, immigration and tax benefits. Thousands are expected to register over the coming months. Now, the winner of Britain's most important art award, the £25,000 Turner Prize, has been announced tonight at Tate Britain. It went to Simon Starling, an installation artist who dismantled a shed, turned it into a boat and sailed it down the Rhine before rebuilding it as a shed again. Our arts correspondent, Razia Iqbal, is at Tate Britain in central London.
Whatever you think about the Turner Prize, it is always a talking point, and this year is likely to be no different. At a crowded Tate Britain, guests heard just under an hour ago. The guests just heard just under an hour ago from David Lammy, the Culture Minister.
It is my very great pleasure to say that this year's Turner Prize 2005 goes to, and I don't know, Simon Starling.
It is the making of any artist. The money's not to be sniffed at. The cachet, though, of being a Turner winner is greater. Simon Starling is keen to acknowledge his peers.
I feel doubly lucky today because I had to wrestle this prize away from the likes of Darren Almond and Gillian Carnegie and Jim Lambie, who, I have the utmost respect for. So thank you very much.
And this is what he's won for. It's called Shed Boat Shed because while it started life as a shed, it was turned into a boat, paddled up the River Rhine and then reconstructed into a shed once more. It's meant to highlight the pressures of modern life.
My work in general somehow deals with that idea somehow, and it's about slowing things down somehow, about trying to sort of retard this incredible speed that we all live at, and sort of think that through a little bit.
Simon Starling's life as an artist will be changed forever, but whatever he says, it will be hard for many people who stand in front of this work to see little more than, well, a shed. And that remains a problem for the Turner Prize. Those inside the art world love and rate it. Those outside it love to heap derision on it. And this year, can a shed really be art, is going to be heard loud and clear.
Razia, thank you very much. We'll be back with the headlines in a few minutes. And on BBC News 24 tonight, Saddam Hussein's defence lawyer explains why he walked out at the start of today's trial hearing. But here on BBC One, it's time to join our news teams across the UK. Bye for now.
Good evening, I'm Roger Finn with the news here in the South. It's been an emotional day for hundreds of gay and lesbian couples across the South. The Civil Partnership Act finally came into force today. It gives gay couples the same financial benefits as married heterosexual couples. This morning, dozens of partners signed up for the first legal ceremonies. And as Chrissy Sturt explains, Brighton leads the way.
I'd like you to sign your usual signature just on that line there for me.
Making legal history. This is Gino and Mike, one of the first gay couples to elevate their relationship to a new level and enjoy a new status in the eyes of the law. Today's form filling was little more than a legal technicality. Their actual wedding ceremony will happen in 2 weeks' time.
I think it's a step forward, and the Civil Partnership has certainly, introduced that, and we have to look at that as a really positive thing, and it is history, made now. We do have a long way to go yet still, but I do believe we are getting there.
Gino and Mike spent the weekend at one of the first gay wedding shows in Brighton. Their own company, Pink Weddings, is booming.
Oh my God! Oh, how are you?
I'm all right. Debbie and Elaine were the first lesbian couple to arrive at Brighton Town Hall this morning. While most of the city still slept, they were already signing up for partnership. So keen were they to get the process underway.
Just because we're the same sex, it doesn't mean, our relationship is any less than heterosexual couple, their relationship would be. There's nothing less about ours than theirs.
The rainbow flag was flying high on Brighton's Town Hall, the city proud to be at the vanguard of social change. Chrissy Sturt for BBC South Today in Brighton.
And late this afternoon, it emerged that one couple had been given special permission to waive the 2-week waiting period. Christopher Cramp and his partner Matthew Roach, who's a cancer patient, were allowed to complete the ceremony at a hospice in Worthing this afternoon. Permission was given because Matthew was not expected to live long enough to do so on the 21st. A huge fire at a country house in North Hampshire is believed to have been caused by an electrical fault. Many antiques and family heirlooms were salvaged from the house at Bramdean near Alresford, which is home to Lord and Lady Northbrook. Well over half the building was destroyed in the blaze. Police in Brighton are trying to trace a group of youths who started a fire on the top deck of a bus this weekend. Passengers had to flee the vehicle, which was seriously damaged, but luckily no one was hurt. As Andrew Tett reports from Brighton, the culprits were caught on camera.
This was the moment that the fire caught hold on the number 7 bus. It was captured on the bus's internal CCTV. The images clearly show a number of youngsters that the police would like to question about the fire.
Some yobs sitting at the back here decided to set fire to it as it was turning into North Street. Absolutely despicable. Can you imagine people sitting here ready to go shopping and suddenly the bus is on fire? The people who did this should be giving themselves up now with their solicitor to the police.
The driver tried to put out the fire, but it reignited. The fire was so intense the road had to be closed while fire crews brought the blaze under control. Brighton and Hove buses say that about £10,000 worth of damage was done to the bus. The police are appealing for witnesses.
Fortunately, the driver was able to get all the people out of the bus safely, so we didn't have any major injuries. But clearly it's a very nasty incident and it's a very serious offence. The people on that bus were very lucky. It could have been a lot worse, and we will be treating it very seriously. these sort of activities could have led to a serious injury or worse.
The bus will have to go away for a major refit. Andrew Tett, BBC South Today, Brighton.
Several hundred homes were left without water in Reading this afternoon after contractors damaged a water main. Bottled water had to be taken to people in the centre of the town. A Thames Water spokesman said they'd had over 1,000 calls from their customers. The damage was fixed by the late evening and supplies slowly returned. With still no hint as to when Castle Point in Bournemouth will reopen, at least one of the big retailers there says it will be taking legal action. The large shopping centre was shut suddenly last week following safety concerns about the car park. While work on the car park continues, the owners won't reveal any more details about what's wrong, though they stress today there are no structural problems with the shops themselves. Asda has announced they will be taking legal action when they establish who is to blame. That is far from clear at the moment. Save our sports centre. That's the message from a group of villagers in Wiltshire. More than 150 people from Tisbury marched through Salisbury to protest at the decision to close Tisbury Sports Centre. The District Council says it can't afford the annual subsidy of £160,000 to keep it open. It's called on the County Council to help out. Football, and Harry Redknapp is out in the cold tonight. At the weekend, he left Southampton to move back to Portsmouth. Today, Pompey said they're looking at other options. Redknapp was turning on the Christmas lights at the Julius House charity in Bournemouth this evening. Earlier, Pompey had a compensation offer to Saints turned down, and they're now looking at other managerial candidates. With Southampton insisting Redknapp remains under contract as their manager, he could be forced to return to work for them tomorrow.
I hope they can sort a deal out and that I can talk to Portsmouth. You know, that's what I would like to happen. But as I say, it's not in my hands. It's out of my hands whether that happens or not. It's up to other people. If they can't agree a deal, then I'm up the Swanee without a paddle. But that's life.
The weather forecast tonight: clear spells at times. Where cloud breaks do occur, mist and fog will form quite readily. Minimum temperature 2 Celsius. Tomorrow, mist clearing to leave some bright spells, just the risk of an isolated shower, otherwise remaining dry. Maximum temperature 8 Celsius. And that's the news from us this evening. Now back to Hugh Edwards in London.
The main news tonight: Gordon Brown admits that the economy is growing more slowly than he'd expected. The Chancellor and his team, delivering the pre-budget report, said this was proving to be a challenging year. At the trial of Saddam Hussein, the court has heard from the first witnesses to give evidence in person. And Condoleezza Rice has denied that America allows terror suspects to be tortured. News Night's getting underway over on BBC Two, but from all of us here on the 10 o'clock team, good night.
Good evening. Well, in simple terms, I think we can split the rest of the week into three. Turning drier over the next 24 hours, a frost on Tuesday night, and then some rain later on in the week. The rain coming from this band of cloud way out in the Atlantic. But ahead of that, we've got more broken cloud. It's still producing some showers here, there and everywhere really through tonight. Very disorganised, but lengthy dry spells, particularly inland. And under clear skies, temperatures teetering close to freezing by the end of the night. So touch of frost and 1 or 2 fog patches. Now, probably western parts of Scotland most prone to the fog and the frost first thing in the morning. Certainly a chilly start here, temperatures close to freezing. Towards the east coast of Scotland, always more cloud with still a scattering of showers. And certainly to the east of the Pennines, northeastern parts of England, seeing a good deal of cloud with some showers filtering their way southwards towards the Midlands and East Anglia. Certainly a lot of cloud in this part of the world. Maybe a bright start across the southeast before that cloud drifts down from the north later on in the morning. Out west, certainly a chilly start, but it shouldn't be a frost across the far southwest. A bit more breeze here. Some showers onto the north coast of Cornwall, Devon, Pembrokeshire and Snowdonia. But the bulk of inland Wales will start dry, and certainly for Northern Ireland, it's looking better than it has done over the last couple of days. Hopefully it will be a dry day here with some good spells of sunshine. There will be a trend through the day to decrease the amount of showers. You'll see the areas of blue shrinking away, so that by the afternoon most places will be dry, with some spells of sunshine. Just along the east coast we'll keep more cloud and still some lingering showers. In the brighter spells, temperatures not doing too badly, 5, 6, 7 or 8 fairly light winds, so feeling quite bright and crisp out there. Now, as soon as the sun goes down, temperatures will plummet away. You can see by the expanding area of blue as we go through Tuesday night, we're looking at a widespread frost, temperatures widely below freezing. Probably the coldest night of the week, and Wednesday morning looks like being frosty in many places. There'll be some patches of fog around too, a wintry scene. A crisp day to follow across eastern areas, some sunshine, temperatures on the low side. Out west, signs of a change. We'll have that weather front coming in off the Atlantic, so outbreaks of rain arriving. Cold rain too, very unpleasant, just 5 degrees in Belfast with a freshening breeze. Now, as we go through Wednesday night into Thursday, this rain's going to stagger its way eastwards and probably just grind to a halt somewhere across the UK. A lot of rain around, perhaps eventually turning drier across the southwest. But in most places, it will again feel fairly chilly. That's it from me. A very good night to you.